Bees. Everything you want to know about bees with Alex Barch, who runs Lexington.
The Lexington Bee Company, which my daughter and I started about 10 years ago.
Nice.
But I've been keeping bees since 1978.
Wow. Here in Lexington.
Here in Lexington. I grew up in this house, and I had a great AP biology teacher, and I had seen my uncle keep bees, and she said to me, go and take a course. And so I went down to Drumlin Farm.
Okay.
And I just got my driver's license. I went down to Drumlin Farm, and they had a course on beekeeping, and that's when I started. So I've been keeping bees for over 40 years.
Wow.
On and off in Lexington. I've lived here in this house on and off my whole life.
Okay. So tell us what you're telling us about upstairs, about how many beehives you have, where they're at, how that works.
I started with one beehive, and then I had one or two, and then I went off to college at Tufts and law school at Georgetown and raised a family and did a lot of other things. And then about 20 years ago, I came back here to Lexington, bought the house I grew up in, and started keeping bees. And keeping bees has gotten substantially more difficult. We have problems now with bees that we never had back in the 70s or 80s, and it's very, very difficult to keep a bee alive. So I went about it systematically and studied, and now I'm one of 3 master beekeepers in Massachusetts, certified by the Eastern Apiculture Society, which is the gold standard for beekeepers. I studied, I took the exams, and I'm a master beekeeper, and I can keep bees alive better than a lot of people. So people started asking me to keep bees in their yard. So I have private clients. I have about 50 hives, mostly around Lexington. I have private clients who pay me to keep bees in their garden. And I also keep bees for free in some of the town and nonprofit properties. And I do it with the assistance of the Lexington High School Bee Club. They'll do things like come in. They come in every weekend this time of year. We're doing the harvest. And all of these boxes in front of us are boxes of honey that I'll pull one frame out. This type of hive is a Langstroth hive. It was designed by the Reverend Langstroth in the 1860s. He was a Massachusetts resident, and these hives are used all over the world now. This is the standard hive developed right here in Massachusetts. And this is exactly what you want to see. This is completely honey, and it weighs about 5 pounds of honey. And
so the honey's still in there?
The honey is still in here. I'll show you. The bees build these little honeycomb cells out of beeswax. Honeybees are the only bees that make honey and the only bees that make beeswax. And when they fan their wings and make the nectar into very thick honey, when it's done, they put a little wax cap over it. So what we do is we scratch the wax cap off it to get the honey down below. And we do that. I'll show you my setup. I'm a sideliner, which means that I make money doing this, but I'm not like one of the huge commercial guys driving the bees all around the country. This is my uncapping tank, and this is what the frame looks like. Oops, this one's broken. I'll show you one that's not broken. After I scratch the cappings off, and some of the honey will drip right down from my uncapping tank. And then
so you basically scrape it in there.
I just take the cap off, and then we take the frames and we put them into the extractor. And this is the extractor, which is a big centrifuge. And these guys have just gone through it, and they're completely dry. What the centrifuge does is spin fast, and the honey flies out towards the back and goes into this holding tank. And then through the honey pump up to a filter, which is essentially just a net bag that takes out any little pieces of wax. And then it goes from the filter into this tank, And these are our jars, and the high school kids will take the jars, fill them, put the labels on, and they're ready for market. So essentially what you get is exactly what the bees are eating. There's no processing, no pasteurization, no heating, no anything. And it has all the local honeys in, so it's particularly good if you have any kind of local allergies to the local
So
pollen.
that's not a wives' tale. That's true, right?
That's true, yeah.
If you eat local honey, it really helps you with...
Yes, it does. It has
Okay.
the reason that the honey is yellow and the beeswax is yellow is because it has the pollen from the flowers in it.
Oh. How long does it take? I mean, you have quite the get up here, but like if I had one little thing in my house, would I scrape it myself, like if you weren't like a professional like this?
Yes, if you only had one hive, you would either borrow an extractor from someone, not a big one like I have, but they have smaller ones.
Okay.
Or some people, if they only have a couple of frames of honey, and often you don't get a lot of honey now because there's far fewer flowers than there used to be, people will just crush and strain it. Crush the honeycomb and strain it through a colander or something, and then you can put it in a jar.
Okay.
But you can't do that when you've got as much honey as I do.
Right.
All right, so this is my bottling tank, and the wonderful thing about this is the spigot. It's really difficult to move honey around because it's so viscous, but this one is perfect. Just push the handle down, and I know exactly where to go. I compete in honey competitions, and I know on glass jars there's a circle right here. That's the fill line, and that's exactly where you want to have it. When the judges will look at it, and they want to see it not above or below that fill line. So I put a gold lug cap on it.
Does the color of the honey ever change?
It changes all the time depending on where the bees have been. And I'll put a label on this.
Where they've been?
Where they've been, yep. The most productive plant in Lexington is the linden tree. And the linden trees bloom around late June. Final thing is put a little tamper-proof sticker on it, and that guy's ready for market.
Nice.
The linden trees in Lexington, I am so thankful that our town fathers planted linden trees all around the town properties. There's a lot of them on Lexington Green, and my favorite one is the big one right in front of Buckman Tavern that has an octagonal bench around it.
Okay.
It's a beautiful tree. When they bloom in late June or early July, they will have thousands and thousands of beautiful cream-colored flowers on it. And when you walk up to the tree, you can hear it before you can see it. Because every pollinator, every honeybee, every bumblebee, all the wild bees, they're all over it, getting thousands of pounds of nectar from it. And one of my apiaries is right on Lexington Green at the Interfaith Garden. So they bring in all kinds of linden honey. And the linden honey is very light.
Okay.
It comes in the early spring and it's a very light yellow. And other plants, the darkest honey that we find around here is buckwheat, which almost looks like molasses. But, depending on the plant, another interesting honey that we get is the purple loosestrife. And the state is trying to eradicate it because it's an invasive species. These purple spiky flowers that you see often along the highways or in wetlands, they came in from Europe. The beekeepers are not happy about it being eradicated, but because for honeybees it's incredibly productive. But the honey that comes from them, the pollen is a dark green, and the honey is a chartreuse yellow-green. And when I worked for the state as an apiary inspector when I was in college, people used to call us and say, there's something wrong. My bees are making green honey, but it's absolutely great. And we also have, this time of year, we have the Japanese knotwood, another invasive species, but the bees really love it, and it makes a red honey. And it also tastes great. It's a beautiful honey, but it comes out kind of a reddish color. So yeah, you get every different, all kinds of different colors. And the same with the pollen. We're not going to go inside a hive today, but if you pull a frame out in one of these beehives that's full of pollen, you'll see right now they're bringing in the goldenrod, honey, which is kind of, very orangey yellow, and the pollen for that. In the spring, we have Siberian squill, this beautiful blue flower, and the bees, they carry pollen in their back legs, and they're coming in with this blue pollen. They look like they're wearing blue jeans because they have blue legs as they're flying in with the squill. Yeah.
Will one beehive get from the same flowers? Like, will they all go to the same place and then come back?
Yes, they will. If a foraging bee goes out and finds a great source of pollen,
right,
she will come back and dance to tell the other bees where the flowers are.
Okay.
Yes, there was a guy named Karl von Frisch in Germany who got a Nobel Prize for discovering the honeybees dance. And they do a dance that, on these frames, I'll pull it out here. The frames are vertical.
Right.
Even in a wild hive, they're vertical. So the bees will be dancing, and straight up and down means directly towards the sun. They navigate by the sun. So if the source of flowers is directly towards the sun, they'll dance upward and then go around again and dance upward. And depending on how fast they're dancing, that's how close it is. And if it's, say, 30 degrees to the right of the sun, they'll dance 30 degrees up. It's a fascinating system.
That's crazy.
Yeah, bees are a super organism, and they have some really unbelievably wonderful and amazing behaviors. And, just the fact that, the guys at MIT, they studied the dynamics of this honeycomb and said, if you were going to lift this up and you'll see how heavy this is.
Oh, yeah.
That is almost, there's probably less than half a pound of wax holding 5 pounds of honey. It is the most efficient building material and method of building that even the MIT guy said, we couldn't do better than this. If you were trying to carry a super amount of weight with a tiny amount of material, the hexagon is the way to do it. So the bees are very, very amazing and smart.
That is smart. I know what you were telling me. So you have a bee truck, and bees followed you home.
Yes.
And you let them out of your garage, and you said they might go like miles back to where they came from.
Yep. The general rule of thumb that we tell people is that bees will fly 3 miles to forage. Of course, bees in the desert will fly even further than that. And bees that have flowers right around them, for example, if you bring bees into a flowering bog of cranberries, they'll just stay right there. They won't go any farther than they need to get the honey. But in general, they'll go about 3 miles to forage and then come back to the hive at night.
Okay.
And they navigate by the sun, so they don't fly at night. So they'll always come back in.
How long are they gone for?
They'll do several trips a day. A forager will go out and they might be gone for 20 minutes, half an hour.
Okay.
And they'll come in with the honey, which they hold. It's called a crop. It's not quite in their stomach, so they're not swallowing it. But they hold this honey and then they regurgitate it to one of the nurse bees in the hive, one of the younger bees, and they pack it into the honeycomb cells. And then they fan it down because nectar is 80% liquid, 20% carbohydrates, and honey is the opposite. Honey is 80% carbohydrates and 20% liquid. So they're using their wings and other methods to kind of boil it down so it's much more thick. But basically all honey is boiled down flower nectar with some pollen in it, run through a bee. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. But yeah, this time of year when there's fewer flowers because the days are getting shorter, my bee truck out there, when I'm driving around, I keep bees at the Robbins Library in Arlington on their 2nd floor. Yeah, it's a great place to watch the bees. And so I was driving down Mass Ave yesterday and all these bees were all over my truck, and I looked in the rear view mirror and the woman behind me is taking a video of my truck. It's got bee bumper stickers and the bees flying all around it.
That's so funny.
Yeah, it was pretty funny.
And you also said you had a huge crop this year, harvest. Why?
I did.
Why? Why?
I'm the
know?
only person not complaining about the rainy summer.
Oh, it's the rain.
Rain, for me, is, too much rain is not good.
Right.
And some of my hives did not do well. If they weren't strong enough, then that's a problem. But for the strong hives, rain goes into these plants and becomes flower nectar. And so the bees are just bringing it all in.
Okay.
And so, the more, last summer was really difficult. We had a drought, and, that was really tough on the bees. They didn't make nearly as much. But now we've got all this rain, and all the plants are green, and all the flowers have nectar, and so the bees are just going to town, bringing it in.
Fun. Cool. Let's go upstairs. I didn't buy it because I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with a chunk of comb.
Nothing.
Okay.
So, yeah, it has, what you'll find if you pull it out and you spread the honeycomb on toast, you can just eat it. It's wax, but there's very little wax. As I mentioned, these guys are incredible engineers, so there's very little wax in it. And so for a long time, I had the same feeling. You don't put it in your tea because then you'll have wax floating on the top of the tea. But you can just eat it with a spoon, or you can spread it on something, and then you get the rest of the honey in there. But basically, it's kind of a pretty thing. And I was getting a lot of calls for honeycomb, which I didn't make a lot of honeycomb because of that issue. But this year I decided to make that, and we also have this is creamed honey, which
I saw that.
Yeah, this is. I'm selling this down. Bread Obsession down on Merritt Road is starting to sell my products, and this doesn't have a label on it because this is a competition jar. We don't put labels on the ones that we're going to compete with. But creamed honey is honey that's been crystallized with very, very fine crystals. So it's exactly the same thing, just a different form. That's, usually we have the liquid form, and this is a solid, and it's the consistency of butter. There's nothing added to it. It's just, I mix some crystallized honey in. I basically start with 10% of this, mix it in, and leave it at 50 degrees, and then it all crystallizes. And I think it tastes better. There's something about the crystallization that gives it a really mellow, best thing that ever happened to toast. So that's what I'm selling in addition to the...
And you have these beautiful soaps?
Yes, people have been using honey as a, for cosmetics for thousands of years. The Egyptians did too. Honey is a humectant, which means that it pulls moisture out of the air. So if you add it to soap, like this honey lemon soap, it's a moisturizing soap. Okay. And the beeswax is also protects your skin. So I also make a beeswax hand cream. This has honey and beeswax body butter. And I have unscented. I think that the smell of beeswax is one of the 10 best smells in the world. But I also add scents because, the first thing that people do when they pick things up is smell it. And people like cinnamon and citrus. And so I do that with my candles. This is one of I probably have more of these monkey's fist knot candles than anything else because it combines my two favorite pastimes, which is beekeeping and sailing. And this is a monkey's fist knot, which we use in sailing, so I make a lot of these. And some of them, some of them have no scent, and some of them I'll put some cinnamon or spearmint or some scent in there because people like the scent. So
fun. My kids went to Waldorf school, so we had a lot of beeswax candles. Yeah,
I know they keep bees back there in the garden.
Yeah, and they usually they used to have an auction every year. I don't know if they have during the pandemic. I can't make my daughter's gone for a couple of years now. My last kid there, but they would auction off a beehive in someone's backyard.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
I told them, when I had my bed and breakfast, They used to use this B&B when they had the accreditors coming, or
okay.
when they hired the Shipakasis
Oh yeah,
as
Robert?
headmasters. Yeah, they brought them here, and then they'd stay here.
Oh, that's very
And they always
convenient.
used me. I gave them a special rate because I wanted to support the school. So whenever they were interviewing or bringing people in who were traveling, they stayed here.
Oh, that's nice.
And yeah, I really like the Shipakasis.
Yeah, they're nice people.
I think they moved on.
They did. They're out in somewhere, Colorado, somewhere far away now. Yeah, he was a nice guy. But yeah, so we do a lot of honey, beeswax, all natural stuff.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Well, here's a couple of products that I've been working on, and I started selling at Bread Obsession.
Oh,
And
this is your.
yeah, the high school kids, they love making these things. These are beeswax food wraps. That's the packaging.
You make these?
Yep, I have a friend who is a fabulous high-end photographer down in Peacock Farm, and I was helping her with her bees, so she did this photo for the label. And you use these, it's cotton fabric dipped in a blend of beeswax, pine resin, jojoba oil, and sweet almond oil, so that you can form it. You use it instead of saran wrap, and you can, instead of using a lot of pieces of saran wrap, you can just use one of these over and over. And the high school kids generally make them for me. And then I haven't really sold them until this year, but I've been making the big ones. And if I buy a loaf of bread, I wrap it up in this and keep it fresh. And so when Bread Obsession said, we want to start selling your stuff, I said, you might want to sell the bread wraps. I use them personally, but I haven't really marketed them yet. So this is me, trying to come up with some attractive packaging.
It's pretty cute.
For them. Yeah, it kind of works.
Right?
Yeah. But, I thought it was a gimmick at first, and then I found that I was using it all the time.
Right.
Like I, eat half a can of something, and then instead of putting it in Tupperware, just put one of these on, stick it in the fridge, and have the rest of it in the next day or two. They work out, it's very, very convenient.
Yeah.
So.
I bet.
Yeah.
Cool. Have you gone to Center Goods?
Yeah, I think I sell them there too.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
That's good. All right. One last thing.
Okay.
We have one last thing. We need to talk about, how do we find you to buy things?
Very easy. I have a website.
Okay. All righty. LexingtonB.com.
LexingtonB.com.
That's pretty simple.
Yep. You can just Google Lexington B. I try to make myself very easy to find. My phone number is all over the internet because I'm also the swarm coordinator for Middlesex County. And in April and May, the bees swarm. And you might look out into your yard and see a football-sized clump of bees. That's how they make new hives. And if you call me, we can save them. So my phone number is all over the place. But if you want to buy something, the high school students built me a Shopify site.
Okay.
So it's very easy to do. And if you buy something, it goes in a box down at the end of the driveway. And it's kind of a takeout service.
Okay.
I don't have the bandwidth to deliver yet.
Right.
But I just put things out there and you come by whenever and pick it up.
Cool. Nice.
Yep. So, and we have a lot of honey this year, so.
All right, so everyone,
buy
your honey.
Please buy honey, yeah.
Yeah, okay, great. Well, thank you so much. This was so much fun.
All right, thank you. Yeah, it was.
Yeah.